Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Pursuit Pod. I'm Calvin Lymper, your host. It's been an absolutely phenomenal last week in the sporting world between the NBA, NFL, NHL. College basketball is on an absolute tear right now. It just feels like March, and it's not even mid-November yet. College football is going good. You know, the Clemson Tigers finally got a win at home, so enough introduction. Let's get right into the discussion. Let's start out with Roundball Rock. Detroit Pistons, absolute tear right now. Random cinematic matchup the other night between the Washington Wizards. And Cade Cunningham led the way with 46 points, 31.1% field goal percentage. Triple-double as well, 12 rebounds and 11 assists. And you tell me, 2 years ago, it's going to be the Wizards and Pistons, an absolute overtime thriller, and that's going to be the game of the night. I would tell you, you're crazy. Pistons were on one of the worst losing streaks in NBA history just a few years back. And the Wizards have just been on a downward trend as of late, but it was a really good, fun game, really fun back and forth game. CJ McCollum of the Wizards even put up 42 and 6 rebounds. Alex Sarr, who I mentioned before, a player that I've been watching, put up 15 and 15. He's one of the bright young two-way players in the league, and I just grew more confidence in that take because of this 15 and 15 performance. A good double-double from the second-year player looking to make his second-year leap. Just a step in the right direction for the Wizards, but an even bigger step in the right direction for the Pistons as they now lead the East, and they just look unstoppable right now. They beat my Sixers. So, biggest narrative in the NBA right now, though, Nico Harrison gets fired. It's been coming since the Luka trade, let's be real. He traded a guy who was supposedly unhealthy, a guy that supposedly keeps getting bigger each offseason for Anthony Davis, a guy who you haven't seen reliably on the court since 2020, 2021, since that ring year with the Lakers. But this trade was just absolutely horrid for the Mavericks, and it follows a slew of just bad decisions by Nico Harrison. Obviously, you let Jalen Brunson go a few years back. You traded Quentin Grimes when he's finally getting to the peak of his prime for Caleb Martin to the Sixers. Trade away Kristaps Porzingis for Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie. He ends up winning a ring in Boston. You just need to wonder, where Nico Harrison's head was at in all of these moves, what the goal of the Mavericks is in upcoming years. Obviously, they have Cooper Flag now. He had a career night, finally, 26 points, finally got his breakout against the Bucks. There were chants running down, fire Nico, fire Nico, fire Nico. You let that overshadow your star rookie, the number one overall pick, his rookie breakout performance, and it just shows that there's an issue with this organization. The thing that got him fired was the owner talking to a fan in a Luka Lakers jersey. And then the owner was talking about how, yes, he regrets that decision, that the franchise needs to think about new beginnings, needs to think about the direction they're going to go into the future. I mean, right now, D'Angelo Russell's back in the starting lineup. This D'Lo-led offense has a 78.4 offensive rating. This is a team that seems deep. On paper, they're a pretty deep team. Obviously, you have Klay Thompson. You guys have guys who have good playoff experience. Kyrie Irving, you're waiting for him to come off his ACL tear, and he's always going to be a star. Kyrie's always going to be one of those players that you want to keep watching, but if your biggest narrative in the year besides, Cooper Flag, and besides trying to get Anthony Davis healthy is you want an older star to come back from an ACL tear, it just shows that you have really no direction for the Mavericks. There's just no direction here. I think getting rid of Nico Harrison was the right decision, but I think it was far too late. And I don't even know if I blame the Luka trade completely on Nico Harrison. I think that the owners had a part of it. Obviously, there was a conspiracy with Adam Silver giving them Cooper Flag in return for Luka being at a higher market. But moving on, talking about the Lakers a little bit. Austin Reeves looks like an absolute superstar. He started out the season putting up 40 on a few nights. Luka Doncic, is just Luka Doncic. Surely should never have traded him away, but LeBron's coming back soon. The whole story was that he was going to come back in late November at some point, and LeBron's timeline is coming close. He's practicing with the South Bay Lakers. He's going to return pretty soon. Biggest question is, where does LeBron fit in this lineup? Luka and Reeves are the 1 and 2, 2 and 1, and Austin Reeves is having a career year. Luka Doncic, like I said before, is just being himself. I don't know where you can fit LeBron into that lineup. You don't want to get rid of the usage rate that Reeves has. You don't want to get rid of the usage and the touches that Luka has. The conversation just really relies on, this hot start Lakers team. They're going to get their guy who's had insane longevity. They're going to get back their franchise superstar, arguably, when LeBron James, but you just wonder, where is he going to fit? An older LeBron James, a guy who might not even be putting up the same numbers that you want him to put up this late into his career. He's not going to be someone that's going to lead the team. You just wonder if LeBron will take a step back and be kind of that role player that'll still put up the numbers, that'll still lead the team, but you don't want to take the spotlight off Luka and Reeves. We mentioned a little bit about the G League, with LeBron James starting out with the South Bay Lakers, practicing with them, and you got to mention just real quick, Victor Oladipo, big ups to Victor Oladipo coming back into the league. Hopefully he got signed to the Wisconsin Herd. I think he's going to be a Sixer in a month. But, that's a 33-year-old that he hasn't played since 2023, but he's still light on his feet. He's still way out of being washed up. Obviously, he had a lot of injuries, was really injury-ridden in those past few years that he was in the NBA, but I think that we're going to see a Victor Oladipo come back slowly but surely, at least for a year or two. Hopefully it'll parallel something like the Russell Westbrook resurgence in Sacramento. Who knows where the wind will take Oladipo. Another one of the biggest stories in the NBA would have to be Ja Morant. There's the biggest question of, did he just lose his love for the game, or is it because of the coaching schemes? Players have been criticizing his solid schemes. A European championship winning coach, so his schemes are trusted. He deserves to be an NBA coach, but he's definitely caught the attention of some players, but specifically Ja Morant. Is this just a story of a spoiled NBA player who's used to having things his way? But now there's the whole narrative of that he's tired of being a superstar, that he didn't want to be a superstar in the first place, and it really just makes you think, what is going on behind the scenes here? But Ja Morant this year is using more picks than he usually has. He's a high dribbles per 100 possessions rate, and his touch rate's really high, right next to SGA, but his efficiency rating, the average efficiency rating in the league is 15, and Ja Morant's putting up 15.1 efficiency on PER, and so right now he just looks like an average bench player. There is no market for Ja Morant right now because he's on his 5-year deal. He has 2.5, 3 years left in that 5-year deal, and you just don't know what'll happen with Morant into the future. Obviously, you saw a viral video of a Knicks fan trying to recruit him to New York, and Ja was like, "Nah, I'm good." Morant's future just might not be in Memphis. Who knows how much farther in the league he'll be? Obviously, he's been ridden with so much controversy in his career, and you just have to wonder, what does the future hold for this guy who was once, the face of the league for a minute? The numbers he's been showing up just have not been proving that he should be a superstar, and maybe his moment in the spotlight is out, and he's still a younger player, but it's just unfortunate what's going on there. Another big story I want to talk about. I spoke about Jeremiah Fears last week and about how he's one of the more exciting rookies to watch, but Tim Duncan's highly praising Derek Queen. You just see the New Orleans Pelicans are on a crapshoot of a season right now. I talked about how their pick isn't even theirs right now for unprotected first. It's the Hawks. It belongs to the Hawks. But to see like a silent NBA player say, I like that kid in Derek Queen, it just shows that the Pelicans need to embrace their youth. There's always conversations about trades for Zion Williamson, what's going to happen with him. He's been injury prone in his time in New Orleans. He hasn't really been reliable. There was a whole thing with his weight a few years back. And so I just think that if the Pelicans want to get on a good direction and continue some momentum, they need to use their youth. I think that Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen are both capable players to be able to lead that franchise into at least hopefully 500. I don't think they're going to be able to make that mark this year, but I think that building it up, trying to get a star in the future in the draft, and letting those guys just take over, I think that's going to benefit the team in the end. Last thing I want to talk about for the NBA is Denver Nuggets. Just some stats that I noticed before we end off the NBA section. The Denver Nuggets are the third best first quarter offense and the absolute best in the league in first quarter defense. And you might think that stat doesn't really show a lot, but I think that basketball games are won in the first quarter. Nikola Jokic is always going to be an MVP candidate, probably for the rest of his career, at least the rest of his prime. He's always putting up crazy numbers, always putting up triple doubles. He plays 11 minutes on average in that first quarter this year so far. There's been games where he's played all 12 minutes in that first quarter. I think that basketball games are won in the first quarter. I was watching Cherry Hill West basketball. That's my alma mater. A game from maybe 2-3 years ago, one of their boys' basketball games was on their YouTube. I was doing some play-by-play practice, just watching this game, looking over their rosters. And they played Cherry Hill East, our crosstown rivals, and I saw a Cherry Hill West team that just got absolutely walloped in that first quarter. They were down by 20 going into the second quarter, and they made it close. They had a really good second and third quarter. They had a really good second half, but the fourth quarter when the game was tied up or they were within 3, any mistake counted. Any mistake was going to ruin you. And I think that, and you saw mismatches happen. You saw bad things go on for that team. If you can get your first quarter offense going good, if you can get that first half offense going really good, and you can stay ahead, that's how you win basketball games. Obviously, I'm going to talk about something later on in regards to my 76ers, about how they lose games in the third quarter. But the Nuggets are playing good basketball right now because they're winning in that first quarter. And I think that's what's going to set the difference between them and other teams in the league going into the playoffs and going into real championship contention. Now I want to move in a little more into college basketball discussion. So let's start out with the Alabama Crimson Tide. LeBaron Fallon Jr. scores 25 against St. John's. Den Holloway puts up 21 himself on 48.1 field goal percentage. Crimson Tide just look good. They look good offensively. Nate Oates is one of the best offensive masterminds in the country. There's a reason that they're always in that national contenders conversation each year, each March Madness. You're seeing this Crimson Tide team. They have a really tough schedule ahead of them. They have Purdue, Illinois, Gonzaga, but this is a team that you're going to want to watch going into the tournament. That this is a team that you're not going to want to play because they're going to be firing on all cylinders. This is a team that it doesn't matter how good their defense is. It doesn't matter if they have one of the worst defenses in the league. Their offense is just astronomically good that they're going to be able to make huge moves going into the tournament. And, you can always trust Nate Oates with that Alabama team. But I think the biggest story in NCAA basketball right now is the freshmen. Koa Pete, Caleb Wilson. I was going to talk about him, but, Darius Akuff dropped 16 against Michigan State. Obviously, Michigan State won that game. He's doing well for Arkansas. Nate Ament out of Tennessee. Nicholas Abdallas out of Virginia Tech. He dropped 33 and 6 versus Providence. AJ Dybonsa on BYU. He was supposed to be like the top prospect coming into this basketball season. Darren Peterson is going to be a guy that you're going to see. He's always going to stay in that top 3. The Boozer twins are still out there. Keon Anthony, Carmelo Anthony's son, shows his discipline in the few games that he's played for Syracuse so far. They're nicknaming him the Prince that was promised. This college basketball year is going to be defined by freshman performances. And, that's a very John Calipari thing to say, talking about how good the one-and-done guys are going to be, but it just shows the power of freshmen. There still exists that recruiting culture. I know it's kind of swayed by the NIL, but freshmen are still really important to the world of college basketball, and it's not always going to be built on the transfer portal. I'm talking about, a guy that returned for a second year, J.C. Toppin. Already, Naismith Player of the Year conversations and considerations there. He dropped 31 points, 14 rebounds in his debut game this season against Sam Houston. He just looks absolutely incredible, and that's going to be a guy that you're just going to keep hearing about as the year goes on. One of the best players in the country, if not the best in the country. Next to him, I have to give big ups to UNC's Caleb Wilson. He looks like an NBA veteran. He's a freshman, I just mentioned him, but that's going to be a guy that you're going to want to see go high in the draft boards this year. I just want to give a nod to South Carolina. They have 2 ballers on that team with Michi Johnson. He dropped 33 points on 9 of 19 shooting. And Eli Ellis. I talked last podcast about how much I like the alternate route to the NBA, whether it be Overtime Elite, the Thompson Twins, G League Ignite. Eli Ellis is a guy that I've had my eyes on just following the Thompson Twins, following the Overtime Elite League. And he's doing his thing. He put 20 points up, 3 3-pointers in Southern Miss game, start out the season for South Carolina. And I think they're a worse team from last year, but they definitely still have ballers. I think they're definitely going to be a team that you're not going to want to play at any point because if they get hot from 3, they're going to be really hard to beat. Finishing out our college basketball talk, I want to talk a little bit about the Big East. I'm a Villanova fan. This year we have, great transfers, but we're a team that's built on the transfer portal. Duke Brennan out of Grand Canyon just looks incredible. He put up back-to-back 15-plus rebound games. I think I saw a stat on Villanova's website talking about how he's the first Villanova player to put up 20-plus rebounds in a game since Daniel Chefu in 2015. Daniel Chefu was one of my favorite Villanova players. He was a center he was our starter in 2016. I think that's high praise for Duke Brennan. And even a Caden Lewis and Bryce Lindsey look like a really solid backcourt for that team. But, they're still figuring things out. New coach in Kevin Willard. They're still trying to find their way, being a team that's all made up of transfers. You just can't predict where they're going to end up in this Big East. Obviously, UConn, St. John's are going to lead the way. Creighton is Josh Dixon, Owen Freeman now. Marquette is always going to be well coached under Shaka Smart. But there's going to be a question mark with Rich Pitino leading Xavier. And even like Georgetown, Ed Cooley, he probably has the best roster that he's had so far in his tenure there. The question just remains, what is it with the Big East? What's going to happen with the Big East this year outside of UConn, outside of St. John's? We mentioned St. John's before. They lost to Alabama. Rick Pitino knows what he's doing there. Dan Hurley's arguably the best coach in the country. Big East had a down year 2 years ago. Only, I think, brought 3 teams to the NCAA tournament. Obviously, last year, they finally brought it back up to 5, but Big East just don't look good. They just don't look good overall. Obviously, besides their 2 powerhouse teams, we might be seeing a down year from the Big East again. We might just be seeing a very unpredictable year. I think that we're going to be back up to 5 to 6 bids for the Big East, but the conversation really just lies. Where can the other teams stand? I said Marquette, Creighton will always be up there. Xavier's a question mark. I think Villanova can make a run. I think they can be an X factor in this Big East. Going into football news now, let's talk about the biggest story in the NFL recently would be Brian Dable's firing. Giants so far this year go 2-8 under him. A whole career with them, whole tenure with them, they're 20-40-1. Dable was not praised for his temper, his time management issues. He alienated his entire staff with the whole Wink Martindale situation. Dable just was not a good head coach for the New York Giants. Obviously, I'm a little sad at the firing, just being an Eagles fan. I was never a fan of Dable. Obviously, he robbed Sirianni in 2022 when they went 9-7-1. So far this year, they've blown 4 double-digit leads, and he was trying to take out Jackson Dart when he just was not ready to play. Obviously, the Cam Scatterbo injury was not his fault, but just a bad blow to him. But there's a lot of question marks about the New York Giants. And the Brian Dable firing is obviously, we talked about Nico Harrison, how that was always a matter of when, not if. But I think Brian Dable should have been fired much earlier before. I think he should have been fired a little earlier into the year, maybe before the whole Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo duo really started to fire on all cylinders earlier on. This is just not something that I'm too shocked at. The Giants are just, they're a team that it's going to be hard to solve them in the next few years, but I think Jackson Dart's a good leader. They're going to have Jameis Winston come in as their QB1 for next week because of Jackson Dart's injury. It's just going to be interesting to watch the Giants, see how they play without Dable. It's been a few years. This is a guy that showed some promise for New York, but just absolutely just folded when it mattered. Speaking of folding when it matters, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. No, it was a rough transition, but they lost to the Saints. Last weekend, I was praising them, talking about, they're 5-4. Bryce Young looks a little sharper. The Panthers just overall look like a better team. They let Tyler Show put up 282 yards, 2 touchdowns. Bryce Young just looks inconsistent. You really just want to wonder where the spark went. I think I blame the podcast, not my podcast. I blame the other podcast. They wanted to return. The Carolina Panthers fan podcast, they wanted to return after shutting down their operations. They wanted to return after they were on a good streak. I think that's what ruined the Carolina Panthers' mojo. I think that this is just a team that, they're still young, still inexperienced. I spoke a little too soon saying that they're going to find their way to a decent record, that they're going to find their way to just keep building on themselves and to not sneak into the playoffs, but to find themselves in a contention spot. I think it's just absolutely sad that we are seeing the downfall of the Panthers again, especially to the Saints. The Saints have just been not good all year. Spencer Rattler wasn't good. Tyler Show's been okay, but he has a career night going off for 282, like I mentioned earlier, against the Panthers, and it's just not what we want to see. Moving on a little bit to the Denver Broncos. The best part about the Broncos is their record. They're 8-2 right now. Now, I talked about last week about how they just need to find an offensive identity, and they are still very much in need of that. They won 10-7 against Genty and the Raiders, and it's the Raiders. One of the most mid teams in the NFL, and the defense played good like usual, but they just are lacking that offensive identity. And Broncos have a good record, but that's the best part about them. They're all flash. I think they're a first round exit, or I think they're a divisional exit, just whatever, if they get that bye. I just don't think that they're going to be a strong team to root for in the playoffs with Bo Nix under center. Until he improves, until he shows that consistency, until that whole offense shows consistency and leadership, I don't know what we have in store for the Denver Broncos this postseason. Moving up the ranks of that AFC, let's talk about the Colts a little more. Obviously, I was talking about how they just look incredible. They are on a really good run, but there's going to be question marks going into the playoffs. But Jonathan Taylor is my MVP candidate right now. He is my MVP pick. He goes off for 280-plus scrimmage yards in the last game, 82-yard touchdown. Jonathan Taylor is playing like Jonathan Taylor from 2021 again. He's putting up good numbers in fantasy. He's having a season similar to Saquon last year. I think that Jonathan Taylor is the strongest bet for MVP right now. I think that they're not going to give it to him. They're going to want to give it to a QB. But I think if anyone has the odds to get that MVP pick finally for a position player, it's going to be Jonathan Taylor. I think he earns it. I think he's been playing absolutely out of his mind. He's come a long way, having a few injuries, a few slumps along the way. He's showing out, and I think that he just looked absolutely scary. You do not want to face him in the playoffs. And teams you do not want to face in the playoffs, besides the Colts with Jonathan Taylor, I want to talk about the Seahawks. Charbonnet, Helani, K9 woke up. I know it was the Cardinals. I know that their defense played really well, but that wide receiver room is just, it looks scary. JSN is still on Offensive Player of the Year watch. Cooper Kupp's still doing his thing there. And now you have Rashid Shaheed, like I talked about last week. They look scary. I will say, the Seahawks are just a team. Sam Darnold, it was not a fluke last year. We talked about this last time, but that game against the Cardinals just absolutely made my thoughts on them even stronger. I still think it's the Rams, Seahawks, and the Eagles are the top 3 teams in the NFL. Whoever wins that NFC lineup is going to win the Super Bowl there. I think that Sam Darnold and his Seahawks have what it takes. I think the defense is playing really well. Obviously, there's talks about the Rams being a better team, but that NFC West is just scary with the Niners still doing their thing. I just said the Rams. Matthew Stafford is having an MVP caliber year. I think there has to be a conversation about that as well. Again, like I said last week, I will double down on this take. If I'm the Eagles, if I'm one of those teams that did well last year, I do not want to face the Seattle Seahawks in these playoffs. We only had a short segment for football, unfortunately, but I want to move on to some hockey talk. Ducks are hot. Anaheim Ducks. Not a lot of people saw this coming. I saw a list about the sneaky playoff contenders this year, talking about the Blackhawks, the Flyers, but you take Anaheim off that list now because they have young players like Carlson, Gauthier, McTavish, and they're just on an absolute run right now, absolute tear. They beat the Jets in pretty deciding fashion. Uncle Leo has, 10 goals, 25 points. He's one of the leading point scorers in the NHL right now. And, we just talked about the Jets. The Jets, I watched the video by Hockey Psychology. Shout out Hockey Psychology. They're helping me get my knowledge up on the NHL. Talking about how they run a perfect offense. Scheifele, he was one of the Hart Trophy candidates to begin the year. The Jets are just getting absolutely outscored, outplayed by the Ducks in that game. And even just that entire California stretch, just absolute inconsistency. And I don't know if I'm that scared of the Jets right now at this certain point in the NHL season. They're still one of the best teams in the league. Obviously, they have the reigning Hart winner. Scheifel's still doing his thing, but you get beat pretty handily by those Ducks. You get beat just in that California road trip altogether. I just don't know how much confidence I have in the Winnipeg Jets right now. And, speaking of other Canada teams that just completely lost my confidence, the Edmonton Oilers. Oh, my God. 9-1 loss to the Colorado Avalanche. What can you even say about that? I mean, the team just looks soulless. McDavid just looks soulless. He's still doing his thing. He's still atop the points leadership, like I talked about last week, about how his points are up. But you lose 9-1. I watched that game a little bit. I watched it until I think it got to 4-0 because I was like, oh man, Oilers are just getting demolished right now. Comeback can happen, but McDavid's not firing. Draisaitl's not firing on all cylinders. The Oilers just look shaky. And that McDavid 2-year deal just looks bad in hindsight right now. I think that he really should have explored his options in free agency. I think that, the Oilers are just screwed right now. We saw it last year. We saw it a few years back, but, they always have a rocky start this season. They look mid-tier. So maybe they'll find their way, but it just does not look good. I mean, that loss is just bad. I think that loss is just absolutely terrible. The Oilers just need to find their stride. McDavid cannot just lead that team on his back. He and Draisaitl cannot just be the two sole stars. I think that you need to make some changes. I think it starts with Skinner as the goalie. Just absolute terrible performance by the Oilers there. But Nathan MacKinnon, man, he is still the best in the NHL. I talked a lot of praise about Cale Makar. Cale Makar has my heart. I talked about that. But 5 points in a 5-4 OT victory over the Canucks. And that's his 11th career 5-point performance. MacKinnon, back at the top of the points leaderboard, just in unexpected fashion. Again, I gave a lot of high praise to Makar, but MacKinnon is still the man of the arena for Colorado. He's still that star. He is still, arguably the face of the NHL right now. McDavid's crown might be slipping there, but we talk about guys that are at the top of the NHL. Let's talk about Connor Bedard, Celebrini. I was just talking about Bedard last week about how I compared him to MacKinnon. Compared him about with that third-year leap, but it's there. Bedard's leap is there. He led 3 points in a 5-1 win over the Red Wings, and I think that, that narrative of him kind of finding his stride in his third year, just like McKinnon found his stride in his third year after a rocky start. I think that you're seeing that. Bedard just might be able to lead this Blackhawks team into an out-of-nowhere playoff contention. But, man, the San Jose Sharks, we talked about it, but Celebrini, the Sharks are just playing winning hockey right now. I think the Sharks coach described Celebrini as having a little bit of Barkov in him. He doesn't cheat the game to put up points. Celebrini is just a dog, man. And, we talked about, the Celebrini versus Bedard comparison last week, but not a lot changed there. Not a lot changed in those guys just leading the league. Then McKinnon, we're really just seeing the rise up of the new generation in hockey, with the Ducks winning a lot. I talked about Leo Carlson, with Canadians being the youngest team in the NHL, and they're doing really well. And obviously we talked about the Flyers. We're going to talk about the Flyers in a quick minute here, but they're one of the younger teams in the NHL, and they're on a tear right now. So the next generation of the NHL is here. The next generation of the NHL is absolutely here, and we have to just stay seated to see what happens next with them. Let's shift gears to all my Philly fans, all my hometown boys. Favorite segment, hopefully, with the Phanatic. But let's open up with these Flyers. We just talked hockey. Let's just calm down with the Michkov slander. Let's calm down with, the Coots quotes about how he has to find ways to contribute while struggling. This Flyers team trusts Michkov, and he's starting to wake up a little bit. He looked sluggish to begin the year off. He didn't rehab from his surgery to begin off, or whatever the narrative was there, but Michkov is still the man here. He's still the guy that we're so glad to end up getting there. And I think that we just need to calm down. I saw a mock article about how the Flyers just need to trade him so we can get fan morale back up. Nah, that's just a bold lie. Talk about how TK was down. TK's going back up. He's starting to heat up a little bit. Michkov was down. He's starting to get back up here. But this Flyers team is just still rolling. And we got to just give some props to some guys you don't really hear about a lot. Drysdale in that Gauthier trade. Obviously, Gauthier is doing really good in Anaheim. But Drysdale, not a lot on the stats, not a lot on the box score numbers, but he is moving the puck well, and he is leading the breakout well, and, him and Cam York are just able to maximize our power play, and, Cam York is leading that power play point effectively. The power play for the Flyers is finally up. Their PK has always been pretty solid. They keep their power play to the outside of the goal, and it's just working, and they're actually able to beat some opponents with it. So the Flyers are still looking up. I'm still really happy with them. Obviously, Zegras is still doing his thing. I think we need to calm down with Michkov, but that's really all I have for the Flyers this week. I think they should keep doing their thing. Let's talk about these Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Phillips, debuting as an Eagle. He was so happy to be here. He made a big impact to start out. 4 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and he had a big role in that final play, that final fumble to give the Eagles the game there. That was a very boring game to the media. But in my eyes, that was an amazing defensive game. That was an amazing, early years football, all defense, just down the mud. No one's even getting past midfield. No field goals are being scored there. That was a 0-0 game at halftime. And it's just, people are always complaining. I had a buddy telling me my eyes were bleeding during that game. And I'm just sitting there like, it might not have been the most, high-scoring. Jordan Love, 40-yard pass to touchdown. Jalen Hurts, 30-yard back to Devontae Smith. That game really just shows you the power of play calling, power of defense. And there was a lot of conversation about that terrible 4th down call. I saw a report about how our OC said that it wasn't him that called that, it was Jalen Hurts, saying that he went rogue with A.J. Brown. And whoever it was, that was a terrible decision. I think that if it's Jalen Hurts, I'm the biggest Jalen Hurts supporter. I have been ever since we were supposed to get Russell Wilson. But if that was his decision, he's got to run laps. If that's the OC decision, you got to fire him. If that's Sirianni's decision, if we lost that game, I wouldn't say put him on the hot seat. That's a little too much, 94.1 over-exaggeration, overreaction. But that you just need to make Sirianni sit down and just make him evaluate what happened in that game. Why would you go for it on 4th and long, near midfield, and then the way you're going to do it is not even like, a slant to the left, easy catch for Dallas Goedert. You're going to chuck it downfield to a struggling A.J. Brown, who's covered by 2 guys. 2 guys drop down in coverage. And the conversation is just, what were the Eagles thinking there? They won the game. And honestly, I think that there needs to be a little more praise to these Philadelphia Eagles. People are saying they're a little bit on fraud watch here, but they keep beating good teams. The Packers are a good team. They keep beating good teams. We lost against the Giants. That was a pretty bad loss. We lost against the Broncos, who I just talked crap about a few minutes ago, but the Eagles are they have a really good track record. Not like the Patriots, they've had some decent wins, but they don't have as strong as a record as us. They don't have as strong of a winning stand as us over the teams that we have beat. I think these Eagles are going to be a team that it's been the story of Jalen Hurts' career at the Eagles. They just keep finding ways to beat good teams. They keep finding ways to win even when things look sloppy. I'm really happy to see Nolan Smith being back as well. I meant to mention that a little earlier, but I just kind of drifted off about the fourth down play. It's good to see him. And two news that I saw recently that just shocked me. A.J. Brown playing Madden on a Twitch stream, talking about how things are just going terrible with him and the Eagles. And there's always a conversation about A.J. Brown and how he wants to be a Randy Moss. He wants to be a Calvin Johnson, the guy who's going to put up a billion numbers, but not really having a lot of success. I think if A.J. Brown really doesn't want to be on this team at this point, if he really doesn't want to stay here and he doesn't want to win with us, even if his production is down a little bit, I think he's just having a little bit of a down year. He's just not really firing on all the shots that the OC's been putting up. I think that there needs to be a conversation about changing the OC, no matter if we do good in the playoffs or not. But if A.J. Brown wants to leave, we might have to just let that decision happen. We might have to just let him leave. Now, don't release him. In the offseason, let's get a trade going. Let's make it a good trade. Let's value him as much as he should be valued. But he won a Super Bowl. If he cares about the numbers that much, we have Devontae Smith. We have Dallas Goedert. I've been one of the biggest opponents against the A.J. Brown slander, the A.J. Brown 94.1 propaganda against him about how he's just someone who has no love for Philadelphia, someone that he won't ever talk positively until he has like an 100-yard game. But honestly, it's just getting annoying at this point. I love A.J. Brown. I think he's one of the Eagles' best receivers ever, period. I think him and Devontae make one of the best wide receiver cores in the league. But man, if you're just going to keep talking crap about our team, and if you're just going to keep making us think that things just really don't matter with you, and I want to be really empathetic to A.J. Brown because I know he's someone that has had mental health struggles. I'm a big proponent of mental health, and I know that things changed for him when he came to Philadelphia, that he actually felt happier. And God, I just really wish that it could be like that. I really wish that A.J. Brown could just give me a reason to believe that he is, give me a reason to believe that, he is the player that the Eagles want in the future. But if he's going to keep doing this, keep stirring up controversy for no reason, talking about how this Madden touchdown he just caught is the highlight of his year so far, there just needs to be a talk with A.J. Brown. I don't know if it starts in the locker room. I don't know if it's the drama from last season that was revealed to 94.1, but there just needs to be a conversation about A.J. Brown that isn't just he's a diva, he's whatever. But I just think if he wants to be that guy on a bad team that puts up crazy numbers and doesn't win anything, he's got his ring here. We might have to let his wish become true. I don't want it to happen. I will always root for A.J. Brown no matter what, but there's just something going on there that might not be something that needs to be public there. And I really hope that it stays private. I don't want to have to know all of, A.J. Brown's dirty laundry there, but it's becoming really worrisome. It didn't really strike me as worrisome until this last week, but there's definitely some worry there with A.J. Brown as a Philadelphia Eagle in the future. There might be a feud with him and Jalen Hurts. I don't know what's going on, but I want it to go away as soon as possible. I want him to be a two-time Super Bowl champion with us. I want him to help us three-peat if we can. But if he wants to be the star somewhere else, as long as we get something good in return. But Jair Alexander stepping away from football for the time being, and he might contemplate retirement. I know that, he's been just regressing, and with the Baltimore Ravens, he didn't have a role. That's not a good defense, and he didn't even have a role there. And so, obviously we traded for him, we got rid of things for him, but what's the thing there? What's going on there with Jair Alexander? He might retire. He's contemplating retirement. Again, mental health proponent. I want to keep it light on this podcast. I hope and pray the best for Jair Alexander, and I hope that. Obviously, I hope that he can come back, wear the midnight green, wear the Kelly green, and, be an X factor for us. But if his time has passed and he thinks his time has passed. Football is a very physical game, and if he's really not going to be to that point, I don't want him to have to force his way there. The secondary's been playing fine. Obviously, it's an issue to start the season out, but I think they can be enough to win the Super Bowl. I'm not the most worried, but I really just hope for him, just on a personal level, that he's okay. I hope that things are going to go well with him. I hope that, he can end up coming back for us, but if not, I hope that he has the time with his family, has the time to himself to finally rehab, get past any prolonging injuries that he might have. But hey, if his final game is, he wasn't at the game, but if his final game, on the stats record that, he didn't play, but if his final game, contracted game, can be beating his old team in Green Bay, I think that's a good way to end it out. So all love to Jair Alexander. I hope he's okay. I really want him to come back. I really want him to play at least a game for us. I really want him to be an X factor for us in the playoffs. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Now, the Philadelphia 76ers. The black jerseys are back. It's feeling like 2000, 2001 again. And that all starts out with Tyrese Maxey. He joins 2006 Allen Iverson as one of the only NBA players to open up the season with 10 straight games of 25-plus points, 5-plus assists. And he's just looking like a leader there. Again, I said last time, he looks like prime James Harden in those early Houston years. I think that we're really just seeing the year of Tyrese Maxey. I think that he's just scoring with ease. He's leading this team with ease. I think overall he is just a unit for the 76ers, and he's going to lead us to something really good. Man, if I have to bring back a conversation from earlier on, talking about the first quarter being really important, let's talk about the 76ers' third quarter. They keep losing games because of the third quarter. This is a team that started out the year really hot, and now they look kind of mid. The big reason for that is because in the third quarter, they just fall apart. They miss shots. They let their opponents just go crazy from the three-point line. I don't know if it's just teams waking up against us in the third quarter in that second half, or if it's the 76ers just completely have no clue what they're doing in that second half, but either way, we're losing that second half. And we're losing that third quarter specifically. I talked about the Sixers being a team that just keeps fighting. I don't want us to have to be a team that keeps fighting. I want us to be a team that leads in the first half and just surges. I don't want us to be a team that leads by 20 in the first half and all of a sudden we're within 5 in the fourth quarter. Whatever's going on conditioning-wise, whatever's going on fitness-wise, whatever's going on just coaching-wise in that third quarter, things need to change. And this has been a pattern that I've seen with Nick Nurse so far. You want to talk about that, Detroit game, Detroit loss. I was talking about how hot they are earlier on, but that was just a doozy of a loss. We could have had that game in the bag, but we just could not drop a final play. I think Nick Nurse's coaching in the clutch needs to be better. I think that his coaching in that third quarter when things start to become a little dull for the Sixers needs to be better. I think that there needs to be more motivation for these Sixers. If we're going to keep losing games in the third quarter, then it's just going to be a disaster in the playoffs. I talked about how the Denver Nuggets are a team that leads from the beginning on, and they stay strong throughout, and that's the team the Sixers need to be. If we're going to keep losing in this third quarter, what's the point of even tuning in the playoffs, honestly? But before I, just get full negative with the 76ers, big shout out to Trent Watford, triple-double, 20 points, 17 rebounds, and 10 assists. And Embiid says he reminds him of Ben Simmons in that performance. And again, this team is deep. I really don't want it to be wasted on a team that just cannot perform in the third quarter. That's why I'm really passionate about them using a really good deep team finally this year. Again, Adem Bona's out there. Kelly Oubre is a really good wing for us. Justin Edwards, last night, the game winner, he is just going nuts. We've got a really good deep team here, and even McCain's not even at 100% right now. I'm getting very fire Brett Brown right now, but there's just needs to be a conversation about Nick Nurse, and I'm really sorry to say that because I love the Sixers team so much, and I love our talent, I love our depth, but I don't want them to lose because they can't coach in the third, because they can't coach in the late game scenario. But Trent Watford's triple-double shows us that there is promise of this team. VJ Edgecombe is starting to dip down a little bit, starting to regress a little bit into just being a normal rookie. But I think this team is going to find their grit again. Even Andre Drummond's doing good things as our backup big. Just keep it rolling, boys. Please keep it rolling. Please don't lose on me now. To conclude out the Phanatic segment, I want to talk a little bit about the Phils. Again, just talking a little more about free agency, rumors. I keep hearing Alex Bregman's name. He was an all-star in Boston, Golden Glove in 2024. and they're looking for a 6-year, multi-$100 million contract with him. I think it would be a good pickup. Obviously, third baseman. This is a big question of, getting rid of Bohm, maybe moving out Bryson Stott out of that lineup. But Bregman, if we can get him, I like it. 821 OPS, 128 OPS plus, and 3.5 WAR. Talked about him. These kind of players that you want to see now. These high WAR, high win over replacement players. Like Naylor, like Alonso, like I talked about last time. I would love to see Bregman as a Philly. I don't know what we'll need to do to get it done. The odds are there. I think that we're going to need to make a splash, especially with the uncertainty around Kyle Schwarber. Now moving on to finally a good week for Clemson football. Death Valley is back, momentarily at least. The crowd was just electric against an FSU team that is one of the best. I think they were ranked third, just in offense this year so far. Obviously, they started out their season really hot with Tommy Castellano, but things just kind of went downhill from there. This is a team that, I really wish that it was that team that was firing on all cylinders from earlier in the year against our hopeful number 4 ranked team. That would have been a really fun matchup. But, hey, Clemson kept FSU to 360 yards, sacked Castellano 6 times, and it was just a win that you knew was going to, just from the beginning of the game to the very end, you knew that it was going to go in Clemson's favor, and that's just such a good feeling. That is such a good feeling for Clemson fans after a year of just ups and downs and fire Dabo and do this and that, and the coaching staff sucks. But it's good to see a win out of the boys. Just big shout out to the Tigers this week, and big shout out to the Clemson crowd. In all honesty, we're only 2 games out from a bowl appearance. 2 wins out of those last 3. I think, honestly, even just 1 win out of those last 3 can get you into a bowl game, and I think that's the expectations are just so low for Clemson right now, but if they can make that bowl, they can win a bowl game. I think that's a fine end to the year, a year that really just seemed like at one point that we were going to go 2-10. And speaking of low records, there's the conversation about firing Dabo. I talked about it last week, and it's just been getting so redundant recently, but it's something that you'll see in college football, honestly. I saw a comment on a Tiger article about firing Dabo. Talking about, Gene Chizik out of Auburn. He won the 2010 title. He's fired 2 years later because they go 3-9. Coach O out of LSU. They win the 2019 title with that stacked team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. But he gets fired because they go 6-7 in 2021. And then you even have legends like Larry Coker. He wins the 2001 championship in Miami, and he's fired 5 years later because they go 6-6. Obviously, some of those stories, there's some background stuff going on, other controversies going on, but I would not be shocked if Clemson really does go forth with, getting rid of Dabo after this season, because the trends are there. And college football and just college sports in general, if you don't do good within 3 years, you're out. Even if you're storied, even if you're whatever. But I just think that, Dabo has kind of had this kind of king appearance in Clemson. You can look at Villanova. I know it's basketball, but if Jay Wright had a few bad down years, I don't think they would have been calling for his head. No matter if things are getting that bad, I just don't see Dabo getting fired. I actually saw an interview with Nick Saban, and Nick Saban was saying that Dabo told him he's just committed to this Clemson team. This is a year they're just going to let go by. They just need to look towards next year. And I think that's good. I think that I don't see Dabo wanting to leave. I know him and Neff are having some, frustrations with each other right now, and he made the joke oh, they're going to fire me after this week. But I don't think Dabo's going anywhere. I don't think there's a reason to worry as a Clemson fans. I think that, I was looking at TigerNet forums the other night. There's some positivity going on there. That's a form that's always negative. College fans are always negative if things are going bad, but Clemson might be coming back slowly. Again, I'm kind of overreacting because it's just FSU. They're kind of fallen off recently, but it's just good to see, Death Valley, just loud again. It's good to be able to hear that from across campus again. And it's just high spirits right now in Tiger Town, especially because of this basketball team, man. Jay Bilas put us 41st in his top 68 to begin the year. He stated that the team's going to need a miracle, but Brownell was going to be able to pull him out. Now, this team just looks deep, like I said before. And I know we've only played not the best mid-major opponents so far, but no, we just look really good. We're playing unselfish basketball. Again, we showed our depth. We have a few good big man players I I said Nick Davidson before. Carson Welling's playing really well. This Clemson basketball team just looks so promising this year. I don't know if it's the best team, a better team than last year, because last year was supposed to be, our Final Four run, the year that we just come out of nowhere and we lost to McNeese in the first round. But I think things will really be shown this Saturday against Georgetown. It's really going to be our first test. I talked about Georgetown. They have the best roster under Ed Cooley so far. That's going to be a telling game. That's definitely going to be a telling game. Clemson basketball is back, man. And Clemson football might be back too. Not to the highest degree. They still kind of suck this year, but Dabo's not going anywhere, and I have faith in my coach. I have faith in the basketball team. Team I don't know if I have faith in right now is Clemson men's soccer, and that's going to be my final discussion for the Clemson Corner. Clemson men's soccer lost first round to Pitt. I talked about that last week, but I went through their schedule, and they just do not have an impressive resume of wins. They tied against SMU. They tied against Indiana, both teams that are just in that top 15. Those are teams that you're not going to want to meet in that NCAA tournament. But, and they're going to be an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. There's no conversation about that. I have an upcoming Tiger article talking about that and really going in depth into that conversation. So I don't really want to be redundant with it, but they just don't have the most impressive resume. They have so many all-ACC team picks. Obviously, Ransford got his Midfielder of the Year award after having just a dazzling year being the leader. But this team just looks inconsistent, honestly. They lost to Queens. They have good losses to, Virginia and just these higher ranked guys. But no, you lose to Queens. And if your most impressive win is against Duke, and they're number 29 on our RPI last time I checked. They're just below Clemson. But you don't have any, if they won against SMU or Indiana, I would be talking about the Clemson soccer team much differently. They have so much talent. They have so many, headliners in their roster, and they're just showing none of it right now. Obviously, that loss to Pitt is huge. They won against them earlier on in the year. They should have made a run the ACC tournament. I just don't know how much faith I'm going to have in them in the NCAA tournament. I still think that this is a team that's going to be able to win a championship or two in the next 4 years. Hopefully, I want to see myself I want to see a championship for one of these sports in the next few years. But I don't know. Clemson men's soccer is just not the most impressive right now, and I hope they prove me wrong. I hope they go on a run. They've been known to go on these crazy runs with lower seeds in the past, so maybe Noonan will shock me. But I'm a big fan of the soccer team, but I just don't know if they have what it takes, in all honesty, to do good this year. Now I'd like to shift away from the serious discussion about sports, more reactionary stuff in that Clemson corner section, but I want to talk about my fantasy team this week. Let's put it up. I mean, just look at this performance, 130, and this is without Dalton Schultz, who's on my bench, putting up 18. That could have been 138 alone. Then even ETN, I've looked at the matchups. I said before, or at least I said in the podcast part of my fantasy league, that this was a week that every player had the green for their matchups. They were going to be able to win their matchups and put up a lot of points and have really good numbers because they're just, they're playing against rougher defenses. And even the Seahawks putting up 21 points over the Cardinals, it's just absolutely incredible. I mean, they had 2 fumble recoveries and touchdowns right away in the game, and I was like, all right, I can just cruise because I don't know. But ETN actually had a good game on my bench. I really thought that Montgomery was going to have his game this week against Washington, and Lions steamrolled Washington, but David Montgomery did not do his thing. He'll probably be benched for the next week. Justin Jefferson didn't do anything either. J.J. McCarthy looks so inconsistent. And even Keenan Allen, he set a record for the Chargers last week. Good for him. Let's clap it up. But 3.9 points, come on, man. I almost lost this matchup. I was playing the second-ranked team in the league, and I had it for the majority of the matchup until the very end because he had Goddard, and Goddard was scoring some. I ended up winning, I think, 130 to 122 or 124, but it was just a confidence-boosting matchup for me, winning against one of the better teams in the league. It's good that my team's finally off of buys. They're doing their thing, and I think that I have a good team this year. We're going to be up against personally what I think is the scariest team in the league besides, the number one team. But my one buddy's team, he is Christian McCaffrey, JSN. So I'm in for a doozy, but hopefully it's an off week from one of them, and I think that I can be guaranteed a win if so. I think I'm averaging 126 next week with relatively the same lineup. Besides Montgomery, I think ETN will be in his place, so I'm just going to roll with them. I'm 5-5. I'm in the 5th or 6th seeding of the playoffs. It's a 6-man playoff, 12-man league. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling confident. I don't know if I'll win this next week. I think I might drop to 5-6, but I can afford another loss, especially because 2 of my last 3 weeks and matchups are against the worst team in the league and a team that just looks like one of the worst fantasy rosters I've ever seen in my life. And this is it's an owner who tries. It's not like he left the group chat halfway through the year. So I think I'll end up being 8-6, maybe 9-5 if I can just win out. I'm feeling really confident about my team, and it's just been a really good year for fantasy, and I'm super happy about it. And I trust my boys. I trust Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's been it for the Pursuit Pod. Thank you all for watching. And as always, go Tigers, go Sixers, go Flyers, go Birds, go Phils.